Hello, my friends, and welcome to the Conflict Specialist Show. I'm Dave Hilton, your host. Now, my guest today is Denise Coggiola, owner of It Takes Three Mediation, located right here in North Texas, where I am, literally just down the road. In fact, we were talking before I started recording the episode. She didn't realize how close we actually lived to each other, so I don't know if that would be that we're competition or not. Denise is a mediator as well as a divorce coach and a marital coach. Denise, welcome to the show.
Thank you. So glad to be here.
All right, so you and I met at the TAM conference, the Texas Association of Mediators conference that was held earlier in 2013. And so I wanted to get you on the show and have an opportunity to talk to you about the work that you're doing because you're doing not only mediation, but also, as we just talked about, doing some coaching as well. So I'd like to start by giving you an opportunity to tell us more about your educational and professional background prior to becoming a mediator and coach.
Sure, thank you. Well, first of all, I spent many years in the corporate world in corporate sales. So some people find that a little bit unusual to actually go into mediation after being in corporate sales, but quite frankly, I did a lot of negotiation and a lot of mediation in sales. It also helped me to really be able to understand the needs of people and be a little bit more empathetic. But as I did that career, I had a longing to do something else. Quite frankly, like a lot of us, a longing to make a difference. And I wasn't really sure how I could incorporate all that sales background into something different. And so a friend of mine actually presented the program with SMU to me, that dispute resolutions program. Went and met, and I thought, that's something that would interest me. So I got a master's in dispute resolution. Originally, I thought I'd take a few classes, and instead it turned into classes that led me to a decision to get my master's. I was hesitant on getting a master's. I had had my undergraduate work many, many, many years before that, and I quite frankly was very afraid about going and getting a master's because I thought I was going to have to write a lot, and I don't write. So I faced my fears and jumped into it, got my master's, and when I was in that program, I actually thought that I would use my mediation work more from a civil perspective. And instead, I found that the good Lord had a different place for me, and family work was where I ended up landing myself. But I got a master's at SMU, and I finished in 2005.
So what industry did you do most of your sales work?
It was in the IT world. So I spent a lot of time selling in the information security world as well as engineering time. So it was very high-end types of projects that I worked on. And so initially, as I thought, well, I will work more in disputes that have to do with contracts or possibly employee disputes. But never did I think that I was going to go work in family. And I believe that was really because I had been a single mom since my children were 3 and 1, and they are 28 or almost 28 and 25 now, and I've only been married 10 years. So I did not think that I would want to live out the day-to-day of what I thought was the most difficult time of my life, working with people in that type of conflict. But actually I found that was exactly where I needed to be. It was exactly what I was needing to do, is to help others in that area that was the most difficult for me.
Now, you mentioned in your professional career in sales that you did a lot of negotiation, obviously, and also mediation work, whether or not you knew that's what you were actually doing or not. So who was it that actually, you said a friend of yours introduced you, but I mean, who actually introduced you to mediation itself, the actual process? Was it after taking a class, or did you sort of find out about it first and then take a class?
It was after taking a class. I knew just a little bit about mediation, not much. I mean, I knew it was going to be a neutral party, but had no idea. And the initial courses were very interesting to me because it was mediation, it was negotiation, it was those types of skill sets that I was already practicing. But as far as the real process for mediation, all of that came as a discovery for me when I was in the program at SMU.
Now, it's interesting where you're talking about, you didn't even know, you couldn't have comprehended at the time that you'd end up doing divorce and family issues and that. And we'll talk about that work that you're doing and also talk about your coaching work that you do as well. But I'd like to spend a couple of minutes talking about your collaborative divorce work, because when I was doing research for us for our conversation here today, I noticed that you're actually one of the few mediators that I've seen, at least here in Texas, who have embraced collaborative divorce work. So when did you become interested in the collaborative form of divorce mediation?
Well, first of all, I wasn't even aware of this term, of a true collaborative divorce. And just to kind of review that, that would be that a couple could go and actually sign documentation for a collaborative divorce, which means that they would participate with attorneys that were collaboratively trained, and that there would be additional neutrals there, financial as well as mental health, to help them to come to an agreement. And what that does in a collaborative divorce is to sign agreements that everyone's going to present information and present it in a timely basis, and everyone's working to that same goal. I would guess maybe without as much game playing, as you might call it. The real risk associated to the collaborative process for a couple, though, is that they have to, if they don't settle, they actually have to start the process over again with separate attorneys. And so it does get them to weigh into that. And as I was in the program, in the very latter classes of my program, I did learn of this. I learned of this through a financial neutral, and I thought, well, that makes a whole lot of sense. So I did go ahead and get some initial training for that. But quite honestly, in today's world, at least in Texas, there hasn't been a place for a mediator to be collaboratively trained. Mm. Meaning, if the group of professionals that are collaborative attorneys and these mental health and financial neutrals, they would probably think of a mediator only to be in the area of a need if they themselves on their team are having issues. And so that began to confuse me a little bit, because I could see so many opportunities where there would be a need for a collaborative mediator who, in cases where their financial ability was not as great to hire neutrals that would be both mental health as well as financial neutrals, and be able to hire 2 attorneys and have everybody present and pay all those fees, I thought, wow, this is what I'm doing anyway. I am satisfying the financial neutral piece of it. I'm satisfying the mental health piece of it in the parenting plan. It makes some sense in a broader spectrum to try to use that same term more from a collaborative perspective, but in the mediation process itself. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. I mean, I've had the opportunity to interview several different people about collaborative law and collaborative divorce and other situations like that. But, I mean, it seems to be more prevalent in places like the UK and parts of Europe, even in Canada, and even in, I guess, New England here in the United States, and even some up on the Pacific coast. But you were the first person I'd come across here in Texas who specifically on the website mentioned something about collaborative divorce. So because you're one of the few, have you had much pushback from attorneys here in North Texas?
I've actually had trouble with them trying to figure out where I would fit, as I said, in that process, because they believe and they see, and rightfully so, that they being collaborative are going to be able to help the parties come to the resolution. But the issue really is that nobody at that table really is neutral. Yes, the financial and the mental health are neutral, but as a true mediator, we are neutral to everyone there. And so it does make sense, but honestly, yes, there is pushback. And so what I've done is I put that out on my website, because one, I want people to understand that there is training for that, and I have done that. I received most of that type of training with my master's anyway, but it's important for people to see that. And then secondarily, in my practice, my professional practice of personal practice in my business, have incorporated some of those very elements into my business itself.
So have you noticed that the people who approach you about collaborative divorce, are they more of the individuals without attorneys, or are the attorneys still working? Yeah.
Yes, they are. So that word collaborative seems to be a good understanding for people, meaning the public that's out there, they are searching for something collaborative. What I believe they're looking for is they want a peaceful process as much as possible. They would like to engage somebody from a neutral perspective, and they're looking for a way to do that. They're generally looking for a way to do that less expensively. And so they don't really even probably know of the formalized term of collaborative, which means, hey, there is something that we signed in the state of Texas that we could do this, but they're searching for a solution for something that is collaborative, more peaceful, less expensive. And so most of those parties that come to me do not have attorneys.
I've noticed that through the work that I've done. I mean, you graduated from SMU a couple years before I did with a master's, so you've been doing it a couple more years than I have. But I've noticed that there seems to be a bit of an environment, or I don't know, it's here in Texas anyway, that when you get divorced, you have to get an attorney. It doesn't seem to be that way in other parts of the country, but here in Texas, that's just the way it is. That when you think about getting a divorce, you get an attorney. So how has that affected your business?
It has, because that, you're right, that's the first reaction that most people would have, is that they would litigate. I think they think that they need to litigate. And since this is it doesn't matter what your education level is at all, you don't understand the process. And so they think that they would need to go to an attorney to help them through the process. So I've spent a significant amount of time trying to educate through networking, through chamber groups, through personal groups, through church groups, that there are alternatives for people. I think that's the most important thing that we can all do as mediators in my field, is to continue to educate. And I will tell you that now, being 5 years along into it, there is more referrals and there is a better understanding of that. I also think that as our generations continue to move, then I think that we will be able to see the younger generation probably embrace this even more, because they haven't maybe seen the best results in another process, such as only litigation.
So let's talk about your company. I mean, you said after 5 years, you started to get more referrals. Your company is growing. So kind of take us through the process of starting your own mediation firm here in North Texas, sort of the history and mission of your company, It Takes Three Mediation.
Sure. Well, first of all, being in the sales background, I was used to having a plan and used to being able to say, all right, let me take a look at what's successful. Let me go forward with what's successful and kind of tweak it along the way. One of the first challenges that I faced was that it was very hard to find somebody in the business that was doing private practice work 100% of the time. And so I immediately found that, all right, this was going to have to be a little bit of try this, try this, try this. My marketing background has been one of the strongest assets that I have, because I'm very used to knowing that it takes work to be able to deliver a message, to sell yourself, to have people be aware. That takes work. And so my marketing background, my sales background really helped there. But in starting out, I did do some work also where I would do not only volunteer work. I think volunteer work is extremely helpful, and I did a good amount of work and currently do a reasonable amount of work at SMU for volunteering, or down in our Dallas area. But I found that was not going to be enough, so I did coordinate with one of the judges to get very low-end cost types of divorces in order to, one, sort of create an internship for myself, all right? And so that presented the ability to do more cases, which made me not only more confident, but actually helped me to clearly understand the process, that a party goes through from beginning to end, because we're not really taught that, when I say beginning to end, of the actual divorce process itself. And from that experience, it then enabled me to take a look at, all right, how am I going to satisfy the needs of all these people that are out there that are needing to divorce and needing to do this more collaboratively. So my business grew into what I call different segments. Those segments are this marital coaching or divorce coaching along with divorce. And they developed really for the practical need of what I saw as I was working with people. Those practices are what helped grow my business, but honestly, to keep me embedded and alive from a working perspective, from making a living, but staying consistently embedded 100% in this mediation business, which is what I do. I am not a part-time mediator. I am a full-time mediator. So I had developed that way, and I'm sure we'll talk about what those practices are all about, but they came alive because of experience and because of working in the field itself.
So then let's move on and discuss your work as a divorce and marital coach as well. So your marital coaching, it's a form of, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's a form of marriage mediation, correct?
Yes, it is. It is.
All right, so how...
It is. And
Go ahead.
Sorry.
That's all right, go ahead.
So for me, marital coaching was birthed, I say, because I found as I even had these cases that I was talking about from the court, or if I was working with a private couple, but especially when I worked on the cases from the court or volunteer, people were not, it was sad to me that if I was the only person that was getting to hear their issues, their messages. And if I had had the opportunity to work with them months prior, I thought some of these issues could have been resolved and their marriage could actually live on. And so that's where that came about, was that if I could save marriages, that would be great. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a counselor. I don't sell myself in that way. But so much of marital coaching is the ability to help people see how to get their needs met, how to communicate, and to really uncover what the true issue is, meaning the true fire versus the smoke, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm. So what kind of training did you do to do the marriage coaching, the marital coaching?
Honestly, some of it was just my personal experiences, as well as I used the same practical mediation skills that I was taught and that I used in divorce mediation to uncover what the issues were, kind of unpack those issues into separate elements, and then help the parties to determine, we're going to work forward, we're going to go forward in resolving some of these and actually take a practical stance on that. To me, it was exactly what I do with mediation from a divorce perspective, but it was in order to keep their marriage intact. It was just a different goal.
So would you consider it maybe like a sub-niche of communication coaching?
Yes, I do. I think so. So much of what I see in marital coaching or mediation is that most people think that everyone thinks like them, and people process information at different speeds. They are relating what they're hearing to their past and their present and where they're at, and most people are not aware of this. And so that's all about communication. And working with that allows people to see where their differences are and be able to move forward.
So what about your divorce coaching?
Divorce coaching was birthed because at times, I actually found my work to be one of the biggest challenges for I think, building a business for mediation or just doing mediation work in a private perspective, is that you need two parties. I mean, if you're going to do a mediation, you're mediating at least between two people. And so I would get a phone call and I would have one party that was very open to having a discussion and seeing what mediation would do for them. And what I've always done is to ask for permission to have the opportunity, since I'm a neutral, to speak to the other party, to allow them to have the same information that this party had. And so many times when I do that, they're both willing to meet and discuss the mediation process, but sometimes not. Sometimes the other party is just not willing to mediate. Or it would be a situation where somebody has already hired an attorney and they are clearly finding that they're spending significant dollars in an area that the attorneys are not really engaged in. Those are things like everyday life goes on, there's huge conflicts, it's making it hard for to have a stable environment to try to satisfy this divorce. They're not helpful necessarily in gathering their information for discovery, helping them to get ready to decide, do I stay in my home? Do I want to sell it? How do I go to an apartment? Do I want to take money out of a 401k? What do I want to do? They're not prepared for any of that. So my divorce coaching comes into play where it's one-on-one, and those people come to me either in the beginning, in the middle, or wherever they're at in order to one-on-one help decide what needs to be decided in that divorce process to get to the agreement. I also listen to what they're saying that their spouse may be communicating to them and helping to understand what that spouse may be saying or feeling even though they're not talking to me. I can generally understand just from some of their verbiage or an email as to what that spouse may be feeling and trying to understand, and that helps them negotiate and communicate better to get to the end of the process of divorce.
So with your specific type of coaching work, I mean, once you work with let's say you work with a person, just one of the couple, and then they decide they want to do mediation, how do you proceed from there? Do you take a step back and tell them, here, I've got some other mediators, I know you should contact them, or do you move yourself into that position?
I do. Once I take on and sign an agreement for a divorce coaching, I can't, of course, be neutral. I am working for that one party to help them get to the other side of that resolution and the best means for them. And so I would refer that client definitely on to somebody else. Every now and then, I've had several cases where the other party is willing to participate only in order to hear some outcome. And so it may be in a rare instance they want me to communicate something to the other party, but that's extremely rare. But I do not mediate. I do not mediate the couple once I've done divorce coaching with one.
Now, I notice you also do co-parenting work.
Yes.
So kind of talk about that.
That being that I actually am married now, and I am with a blended family. I have lots of years of experience being a single mom as well as with blended families, and that's a very big challenge. I also facilitate what's called a divorce care class, and that realm also enters into discussions about blended families and that kind of thing. But there are numerous issues that occur after the divorce, and those issues are created generally in the areas of the kid stuff, meaning, we're having trouble even talking about, how we're going to get a car for Johnny, or we are having trouble just even trading off the kids, or this schedule that we got doesn't work. One of the parties or both the parties have remarried, and there's more people and more elements that are into play. And so those mediations can certainly be more than just the two parents. It could be additional spouses and additional parties that come into play with that.
Now, are you familiar with nesting at all?
Yes. Actually, I've experienced that a little bit more lately.
Yeah.
And what I find is the best to discuss in nesting. So my nesting discussions come up both when I get a private client, generally, there is this discussion over, especially if I'm getting them from the beginning, there's this discussion over, all right, who's going to leave the house, who's not, what should we do? And the nesting discussion is coming up more often. What I definitely think is important in this area is to help the parties come up with boundaries and, again, a roadmap of what that looks like. And those kinds of boundaries have to do with privacy, because you're entering, what nesting is, of course, as you know, is that the parent is doing the shifting and the kids are staying in one place. And so there's this ability to actually invade privacy in either of these locations. And so that's a biggie that needs to be discussed. And even just simple cleanliness. Those kinds of things become very important. But I do find, especially people that have very different schedules, people that, pilots, people that work in restaurants, sometimes it's better for them to do the nesting piece as well because of the way the schedule is. It's just an odd schedule. But I am definitely seeing more of that.
Yeah, I probably heard about that just several months back, and now I see more and more discussions and commentary about people choosing to let their kids be comfortable in their space and them take on the burden of having to pack up and move for however long that they decide.
And it's a beautiful way of really putting your children first. However, I think it's a very serious decision and one that needs to be thought through and planned, because it could go south too. I mean, meaning it isn't right for everyone, and so it just needs to be discussed.
Yeah, and I want to talk about some of the things that maybe it's not so great for, because I think about the more I read about it, the more I understand it, the more I've talked with the few people who have done that, is that, those little things that when you're married start annoying the crud out of you about your spouse. So maybe even some of the reasons, as you mentioned, maybe whether it's about cleanliness, whether it's about whatever it could be. You have the potential of those things showing up again whenever you're sharing space. Even though you may not be there at the same time, you still have to come back, and at some point you'll come back to that same thing that or at least one of those things that caused you to want to get a divorce in the first place.
Right, and we all know, working in this field, that people that are in, even if they're not sure that they're divorcing yet, or they are separation to divorce, there is very little trust. That's been broken down, and there's very limited communication, not with everybody, but in a majority of the cases. So it sets up the difficulties with those two items right there, because they don't naturally talk through the issues that might occur. So being able to really paint the environment, to give them a good picture of what that looks like, is very important. I find that, though, painting a picture is very important for them if they haven't left their home yet and they're both together and one person is going to leave, that it's best for us to be discussing that so that they can visualize it. If people can visualize what it is they're going to be able to move through it much easier.
So let's talk about your goals or plans for your company. It Takes Three Mediation, let's say over the next 3 to 5 years. What would you like to see happen?
Well, a dream of mine would be that, and first of all, let me comment on something that I didn't really get a chance to comment on when I was talking about my company, and that is my company name, It Takes Three. If you visit my website, which is actually www.dfwpeacemaker.com. I know that's a bit strange, but I had developed the DFW Peacemaker before I developed the tagline of It Takes Three and made it my company. But if you look on that website, you will see that I am a spiritually based person, that for those that are, some of my clients are and some of my clients are not spiritually based, but for those that are, you might relate to the fact that it takes three. The third person's not me. In my perspective, the third person's actually God. And for those that are not as spiritually grounded in a walk or don't believe in that, that's fine too, because a mediator is definitely a good third person and is needed in order to help with conflict in most cases. But in either case, I'm not in charge of the outcome. The parties are in charge of the outcome, but from a spiritual perspective, one would look at that for a higher being. But one of my dreams would be that I would actually have a facility that incorporates the needs of people in this process. That would be where there would be mediators like myself, but that there would be available resources for therapy or counseling. There would be a resource in the area for, especially, let's say, addictions. I see a lot of work in the area of addictions. And then also those that want advisement from an attorney. So there would be attorneys that would be a part of that practice as well. Financial people that would be a part of that practice. And so when a person comes in and they are struggling to know what to do, they could have an intake meeting and then immediately have resources that could help point them in a direction to think further about what they're doing, because I think many times people just need more information, kind of need to slow the train down and kind of understand what their options are. And so I think that would be a great place. I'm in private practice now, and one day hope that that would be the case, but that's my dream anyway.
So you've basically made your specialty divorce and some coaching. Are there any other niches or specialties or industries out there that call to you in the back of your head, or you dream about it, like, I might like to try or dabble or do some work in that particular field?
I actually am very interested in elder mediation. There's a bit of a touch of that on my website. Some from a personal perspective, because I have seen this with my own parents, but also because it is one of the other big areas of conflict for people now. And my whole goal in my practice is to help families stay together, whether they are disconnected because of divorce. They can still be connected in some way. And I hate to see through the elderly and all the decisions that are needed for a family to be split apart. And so there is much work that can be done, and I'm sure you're familiar with that from an elder mediation perspective. That would be a very good area for me also. However, I do think that you do need to focus and really hone in your expertise and your interest in specific areas. And so most of my time, of course, is spent in divorce or separation or marital coaching to stay together.
Well, it's great to hear about all the work that you're doing, and I've taken up a lot of your time today, so I want to get to the last couple of questions here and wrap up the show. So the first one is a question I ask all of my guests here on the Conflict Specialist Show, and that's, can you think of one or two people who you feel have inspired you or had the biggest impact on your career in mediation?
Yes, I can. Tom Hartzell is an attorney that's in the program, is a professor at SMU, and I respect him immensely. But I have an interesting story there because, again, I told you that I entered the program not thinking that I would be doing family work. And Tom Hartzell's focus is in the family mediation side of the work. He's a family mediator and a family attorney as well. And so we were getting ready to sign up for classes, and he came to me and said, well, you are taking my family mediation course this next semester, aren't you? And I'm like, no. And no, I'm not. And he goes, well, why? And I said, I just, that was part of my life that I just don't know if I would be the best at it. And he says, well, you did say that you were going to go full-time in this business, aren't you, Denise? And I said, yes. And he said, well, you need to be diversified. And besides that, I think that you would be excellent at it. And so at that moment, I took his advice. I began taking the family mediation courses. And I will tell you that it was life-changing for me. It was the answer that I was looking for. So I attribute so much to Tom Hartzell for that. And then the second person is a personal mentor for me, who's more from a spiritual mentor, and that's Barbara Schaffler. She is a huge praying partner of mine, somebody who has inspired me from the beginning that I could reach out and do this, and that I had plenty to give back. So I attribute my second piece of being where I'm at today from Barbara Schaffler.
Yeah, I'm a little biased towards Tom as well, so yeah, I get it.
The great
Yeah,
man.
I definitely get it.
Great man.
So the second question that I have before we wrap things up today, do you have any upcoming training programs or workshops or speaking engagements or anything that you want to talk about before we wrap things up?
The one that comes to my mind the most is that I mentioned it earlier, I facilitate a divorce care class, and that is a 13-week program. It is a nationwide program. You can visit the website for divorcecare.org, but it's a huge volunteer commitment on my part. I do 3 classes a year, 3 13-week classes a year. We're in the middle of a class right now. We will begin our class on, I think that's Monday, September 16th, again, and I happen to facilitate one in Plano, Texas, at Christ Church. They are free programs, and they are excellent for people that are separated, thinking about divorce, in the divorce process, and post-divorce for many years. And I just want to mention that course and feel very strongly about that, but certainly welcome people to continue to watch my website at www.dfwpeacemaker.com, because more will follow in the area of seminars.
And I'll link to your website as well under the video when this posts up on our website as well, so people can visit that. Well, Denise, again, thanks so much for coming on the show, taking time out of your day. Great to have you on the show.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
All
Now,
right.
if you want more
Bye-bye.
information about Denise or It Takes 3 Mediation, again, her website is dfwpeacemaker.com. And if you enjoyed this episode of the Conflict Specialist Show, or maybe know someone who will, please help us grow and share it with at least one person that you know. And be sure to subscribe to our email list as well, so you never miss a new episode of the Conflict Specialist Show. You can do that at conflictshow.com. See you next time.